I'm going to talk to you about cosmic habituation and decaying truth. This is Jonathan Schuller, and he had a study called verbal overshadowing. And what he did was he made people watch a video of a bank robbery, and then he split the people into two groups. One wrote down what they saw and then had to describe the bank robber later. And the other didn't write down what they saw, and they just had to describe the bank robber later. And weirdly, the people that didn't write the description down at the time described it better, which was counterintuitive, but it got replicated, and it got replicated again, and then it actually got replicated with sommeliers. If you don't write down the description of the wine that you're having, you tend to identify it better. And then it got replicated with like the best jams in the world and the jam contest. And finally with creative problem solving. If people write down what they're thinking at the time, not so good. And so Jonathan Schuller, he kind of like turned into a king in behavioral science because he identified this like big counterintuitive truth, and he was really famous until he wasn't famous. And the reason for that was because in the first 5 years when people replicated this, it worked really well. And then it started not working as well. And Jonathan Schuller, he doubted people, and he went back and he replicated his study, and it did 30% worse. And then he tried it again the next year, and it did 30% worse than the second time. And now that effect barely exists. And I know that that sounds like some far out shit, and you're probably saying there's a replicability crisis, or maybe there's some reversion to the mean that's going on, if you know your statistics. That's what people thought first, but it turns out that this is like really widespread. In the 80s, there was a study that said symmetrical birds, they make for better partners, they have better sex. And fruit flies, if they're symmetrical, have more sex. And symmetrical dancers are rated as better dancers. Well, not that surprising, seem to be widespread. The first year that people tried to do this, it went 8 for 8 in terms of studies. The next year it went 8 for 9. By the early 90s, it was going 3 for 12. And by the mid 90s, it was going 1 for 16. And this happens in the medical world too. Abilify, Seroquel, and Zyprexa, they're anti-schizophrenic drugs. They were thought to be twice as good as the drugs that went out into the 50s when their peer-reviewed studies got released. And now they're worse than the drugs from the 50s. This has happened in cardiac stents. This has happened with vitamin E studies. And SSRIs, they're now in current studies 1/3 as efficacious as when they came out. Thank you. And like, you can read about this shit in the New Yorker. You can listen about this shit on Radiolab. This is in Wired. Like, this is not some far out site you've never heard of before. And so where am I going with this? This is where it gets a little bit more stoner. Do you ever feel like you're barely here? Do you ever feel like you used to be more of a person and you're just not as fruitful, as true anymore? Like, we're told it's like capitalism tells us that truth is this constant, right? That there's some platonic ideal of truth that stays the same, and we're just trying to fumble towards it, right? Peel back the curtain and try to see it. But in reality, truth is more like a mushroom. It kind of pops into existence, and then it decays over time, and then it kind of returns to the dust that it came from. And I know this is like tricky to say in like a Trump world, but like truth is like us, like we're born, we age, and we die, and truth is this changing concept. And because of this, I just want to say that like, if you're searching for truth, you don't have to go sweep an ashram for a decade and hope to like see some guru and get enlightened, because by the time you do that, truth will be gone. Like, you don't even have to go for a weekend at fucking Esalen, right? Like, you can get truth with 5 grams of psilocybin in your living room tonight. Like, if you know where the dimethyltryptamine elevator is, you can get there in 15 15 seconds. Truth.